Welcome into the DNZ Fantasy Football Podcast, podcast numero uno. First podcast, we're excited to get into it and get started here. We're here to talk about the NFL and everything Dynasty Fantasy Football. Also just a great excuse to talk football and create more buzz in our home league, League of Compromise, with our other league mates. And we're just want to have some fun here at the DNZ Podcast. My name's Drake. I'm here with Nick and Zach, my fellow league mates and pod host. Just 1 week from the NFL draft, hosted in Vegas here this year. I cannot wait till next Thursday, fellas.
I'm on the edge of my seat. This has been an NBA-esque offseason in the NFL, and it keeps going on. People have been talking about this is like the NBA. It's still happening. We got wide receivers wanting to dip. We got people sitting out of workouts left and right. We still got probably more trade and draft drama than I've ever remembered leading up to some shit.
Oh, and like you said, it already a lot of drama, and I think it's only going to get higher and higher the closer and closer we get to the NFL draft. A lot of teams with a lot of capital. I don't think we've seen the last trade for players. We'll obviously get into that a little bit later, but there's a lot going on, and it's really exciting time to be looking into your fantasy football teams.
Ever since that damn Christian Kirk contract, this whole wide receiver market has exploded. Whether it's like guys like Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson coming in and having immediate impacts, that's changing that. I'm not sure what's the biggest adjustment there, but these receivers are getting their bags this year, and a lot of guys are starting to be on the move, like Venna mentioned. We'll kind of get into that. There's been some other signings that have gone on here lately. We'll dig into that. And we're also going to try and discuss rookies here this year. We've got a few of my guys picked out between the three of us. We kind of came up with a consensus between the three of us, positional-wise. So we'll go through the top 10 wide receivers in our eyes, as well as the top 5 running backs, top 5 quarterbacks, and we'll briefly mention about one tight end probably as well. So a few signings happened here this week. We'll go ahead and start there. Derek Carr, new contract with the Raiders. What's that shaking out to there?
Yeah, Derek Carr did sign a new contract extension. It is a 3-year, $121.5 million contract extension. It includes a no-trade clause. On top of that, I mean, they've just done a lot of off-season stuff this year. Signing Devontae Adams, signing and trading for Devontae Adams, giving Max Crosby a pretty big contract, going out, getting Chandler Jones. I think a lot of teams here in the AFC West are trying to follow the cap wizardry that the Chiefs kind of have been doing, because I don't know how you get that many, $121 million, $142 million, almost $100 million for Max Crosby, and then 3 years, $51 million for a 30-year-old Chandler Jones. Like, they're just out here spending money left and right, really trying to do whatever it takes to kind of overtake the Chiefs here in the AFC West. So
Raiders really open up that checkbook.
That is 100% for sure. Another interesting signing that we saw here, Sammy Watkins going to the Packers on a 1 year deal, worth up to $4 million. What do you guys think? Should anyone snag him, add him to the roster?
Don't discount Alan Lazard.
Sure, he was a beast at Iowa State, and he's had a couple good games in his career. Probably is his time to shine, considering, again, the desert that is the Green Bay Packers wide receiver room.
Plus, we all know that they're probably going to be targeting one of these receivers here in the first round.
And they do still have Amari Rodgers, who they drafted last year. He didn't have a lot of run last year, so we'll kind of see what steps he takes as well. But happy for Sammy Watkins, Super Bowl champion. So
I went and snagged him. Worst comes to worst, I have a really good rookie draft class, and I'm able to leave him on like or have someone on the taxi squad. And if someone starts performing, I just drop him. But
I think he's certainly rosterable. Just see if he can stay healthy.
Mm-hmm.
There's a good chance he might occupy the IR all year long, but again, it is a desert up there in the wide receiver room, and he's the biggest name there.
Watch him just have a huge week one like he has in the past. He's the king of week one
production.
Sammy Watkins is. So if you've got him on your roster week one, throw him in there, see what happens. Other contracts that's going on, Kyler Murray, quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals. Got a little bit of a contract dispute at the moment. He's only guaranteed $5.5 million this coming year, and it's been reported that he's not going to play on that contract. His agent, Eric Burkhart, informed the team a few weeks ago that he pulled his opening proposal off the table. So they're not in a good spot in contract negotiations. And I think a deal will get done eventually, whether that's before or after the draft. I think that's undetermined at this point. But a lot of people think Kyler Murray's maybe asking for this contract too soon. But if you go back and look when Patrick Mahomes asked for his contract, Josh Allen asked for his contract, this was all at year 3. Third year being the starter, they got their contract. So I don't think Kyler Murray's like being selfish and coming at this too early. I think he deserves a contract now. Whether he get it this year or not, I have no idea.
I think both Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes kind of proved a little bit more in their 3 years in the league. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes winning MVP, 50 touchdowns, 5,000 yards, Super Bowl MVP, Super Bowl champion. I think he had an obvious case, and the Chiefs knew that they had their guy and want to have him there long term. Same with Josh Allen. Obviously, he doesn't have the Super Bowl or the MVP, but he's been in there putting up astronomical numbers. I think Kyler Murray, honestly, I feel like everything there going on in Arizona is just kind of like a year-by-year basis. They don't know if their coach is going to be the long-term solution. They don't know if their quarterback is the long-term solution. I mean, he puts up crazy numbers one week and then has a bad week the next. And then he puts up crazy numbers and then he has a bad week. I don't think there's that consistency that they're wanting to see to commit to something long-term.
And you think about last season, the Cardinals looked like one of the top teams. They were undefeated through at least the first 6 weeks. I don't remember off the top of my head, but they were the last undefeated team last year.
They were undefeated until J.J. Watt got hurt.
And DeAndre Hopkins went down as well, and that didn't help Kyler in the offense overall down the stretch either. Bad playoff loss, just a bad taste in your mouth if you're an Arizona Cardinal. So maybe Kyler Murray gets signed, they agree to a contract, and it's harder for players to sit out. Like, they can't just opt out and say, hey, you're not going to pay me, I'm going to sit out. There's fines involved in that. And so if a deal isn't striked, I mean, I think it's hard to say that Kyler's going to sit out. So I don't, as an owner of Kyler Murray myself, I'm not too worried. But, I mean, he's still a good fantasy quarterback. I think it's been yet to determine whether or not he's a good real-life quarterback. He still hasn't proved it a whole lot. And I think that's kind of where Arizona's at. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next few weeks.
I think, personally, I'm going to move against the room here. You need to pay him right now. It might be early, but he's asking you to pay him. Kyler just wants his money. He wants his guaranteed big bag. And you can't tell me you're going to have good luck finding a quarterback as good as Kyler Murray. Someone else will pay him exactly what they are apparently not wanting to pay him. They'll pay him no problem. Everyone knows having a good quarterback is the most important thing in the NFL. The Chiefs were a consistent playoff team winning the AFC West with Alex Smith. We're never going to sniff the Super Bowl with Alex Smith. Quarterback is huge. He's asking you to pay him. It's only going to get more expensive year over year. If he does sit out, it's just going to get more expensive because he won't have anything to knock that value down on. Just pay him. Who are they gonna go replace him with?
I agree. And Lamar Jackson's in a similar spot. He deserves a contract at this point in time, but his camp, I mean, I think he's at a point where I've heard Lamar Jackson's willing to play through his contract right now. And I think that's almost a smart move for Lamar Jackson because there's guys like Murray who are going to get signed between now and then. There's other quarterbacks out there probably that are going to get big contracts before now and then. So that's only going to raise the price for guys like Lamar Jackson. So this quarterback market will be interesting to keep your eye on. A lot of young guys out there. A lot of young wide receivers on the move. Only been in the league the past few years, but a handful of guys skipping on-field workouts and waiting for contracts to kind of come through. All part of the same draft class, I believe. What draft class was that? You guys remember off the top of your head?
Was it not 2019?
I think it was that 2019 draft class. But we got Debo, A.J. Brown, DK, and Terry McLaurin all sitting out there on-field workouts at the moment. I'm pretty sure they've all got the same agent, I'm pretty sure. I think it was at least
that's
Debo and AJ Brown and DK do. I think Terry's in there. So that's the same agent as what's that guy? That corner Denzel Ward. He just got a big contract, $100 million contract at the Browns. Saw that, you're like, holy shit, that dude got the bag. So this, I think their agent is doing something good for these guys themselves on trying to get them paid. I think AJ Brown's really close to signing a deal with Tennessee. I don't think he's going anywhere at this point in time. Debo, I think he could easily come back to the 49ers, but I think it could go either way with Debo. So Debo is very interesting. He's kind of been the topic of discussion the past week or so.
Do you know what's kind of funny? And I was thinking about this while we were talking pre-pod. Do you know what all these guys, other than having the same agent, do you know what they all have in common?
Same draft class.
Same draft class, but they were all drafted outside of the first round. I almost wonder if there's all this love for wide receivers in the first round now, because once you get outside that first round, you don't have that fifth-year player option. You don't have that control over these guys. I wonder if the wide receiver market has shifted to such a point where a high emphasis is placed on having that extra year of player control for these organizations is leading them to, not overspend, just because, the market's dictating that. These guys are almost they're up there for second and third most valuable player on your team outside your quarterback, your tackles, and your edge rushers. They're out here demanding money and demanding trades that you really only see for quarterbacks and edge rushers and right tackles. So I think this class really kind of started that paradigm shift in valuing receivers and wanting to get them in the first round. I don't know.
I think it's hilarious nowadays where a player can go out there and ask for a trade. And in the past, when that would happen, you'd be like, oh, that guy's a diva. I don't want him on my team. Like, get him out of here. Like, if you're asking for a trade, okay, bye. See you later. You're not committed to us, whatever. And nowadays, where these guys come out here and asking for a trade like Debo, everybody else around the league is like, okay, Debo, let's go. Let's trade for Debo. Let's bring Debo in. He wants a trade. Let's go. And I think that's an interesting change that we've kind of seen in the NFL past few years.
One thing I heard, they were talking about Randy Moss back in the day, and he was in Minnesota. He went to the Raiders right after Minnesota, correct?
That sounds right, and then he went to the Pats.
So, do you know what the trade was for Randy Moss from Oakland? It was for like a 5th and a 7th round draft pick.
For him to go to the Pats.
There was that much of an issue with his on-field, not production, but his on-field demeanor and his reactions with the coaching staff and all of that.
And Brady was in his ear probably. Brady obviously wants to play with a guy like Randy Moss.
Oh, exactly.
So Randy Moss probably extended every avenue to try to get out of there and go play with Tom Brady. Why wouldn't you? It worked out.
It's just crazy that a top-tier receiver like Randy Moss was able to be traded for essentially a bag of fucking chips.
Right.
Let's look at all of these guys and their individual situations in terms of they all are threatening to be moved. They're all sitting out. But what do the teams want to do? Debo. So the Niners, they're in a we think we can win. They're in a win now mode. What do you do with that? AJ Brown, the exact same deal. I saw Vrabel. He said that they're not going to get rid of him as long as he's the coach. And again, they're a contender, so I don't see these contending teams. Guys.
Yeah, San Fran wants to sign Debo. Tennessee is actively trying to sign AJ Brown. And then now what you're saying, those teams are win now. Of course they're going to try and bring those guys back. But a guy like DK.
And Terry.
Right.
Hell, you might as well. Because the NFL is all about winning Super Bowls. The Rams have cashed in. They've sold their soul.
Fuck them draft
for
picks.
3 years.
Fuck the cap.
3 lives worth of souls they've gotten rid of, but it doesn't matter. They won the Super Bowl. That's going to hang in their stadium forever. So you can get a lot from a team that thinks that DK or Scary Terry might be that one missing piece, and you guys aren't going to win. You guys aren't winning a Super Bowl in the next 3 years. Seahawks, Redskins, Yeah, that's right. Redskins. You guys aren't winning a Super Bowl in the next 3 years. Are you going to pay these guys a ton of money that they're absolutely worth, or just pass it along? Just pass it along, get what you can.
So we're obviously a fantasy football podcast. Thoughts on them leaving their current situations, and I know the biggest team that's been kind of looking to target some top tier receiver is the Jets. Obviously, they missed out on Tyreek. They tried offering their 2 seconds and a couple other picks, which didn't get the deal done. Do you see them finally starting to kind of come together and realize, hey, we need to be willing to offer either the 4 or the 10? Obviously, it's probably going to be the 10 and a second and some other shit. Do you see them ponying up, and instead of maybe taking someone like a Drake London, getting someone like a Debo, AJ Brown, like you said, he's probably the closest to getting his contract done. But do you see them getting maybe Debo, getting Terry, or even DK? Like, I know Seattle said that they're going to keep DK, but if you get offered that 10th overall draft pick, that's a hard no, especially when he's going to be dictating so much cap space. You can go and you can get someone like a Drake London. You can get someone like a Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, the Jets have been super active in the wide receiver. The Jets have been super active in the wide receiver market. They tried to get Tyreek, and as soon as that was made knowledge to the public, that cat's out of the bag. The Jets are trying to add a wide receiver to this team to help Zach Wilson. And I think as soon as you plug in any of those guys,
whether it be a first round wide receiver or a big name trade, that's actually a really scary looking wide receiver room.
Right. It's only good for Zach Wilson. I think they're going to add to the wide receiver room, whether it's a guy currently in the NFL or through the draft. But when this news first dropped, when you hear Debo, AJ Brown, DK, Scary Terry are on the trade block possibly, those first few teams that are like mentioned that might be interested are the Chiefs, the Packers, the Jets. So I think the Chiefs are a little less likely. I think it's been reported that we're out on Debo. But the teams like the Jets, I think they could definitely take a shot on one of these guys and try and get rid of some draft capital. But with the Chiefs, what they want to do, they just want to sit tight with their draft picks, and all plans are staying with the draft. And the Jets, I think, could do the same thing and draft a guy like Drake London. But to go get a guy out there that's proven, I mean, the Jets already tried it once. I mean, I think they certainly could do that again. But with Debo, how they used him, and that's the story. How the 49ers used Debo is probably
what he's looking for.
He doesn't want to be a running back. He wants to be a wide receiver one. He wants to be running routes. He doesn't want to be taking handoffs out of the backfield.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we watched his full highlight video from last season, and we know he did get a lot of carries. Zach, can you look that up? How many carries, how many rushing attempts did Debo have?
I know his rushing attempts skyrocketed towards the end of the season. 49ers needed to make the playoffs, and handing the ball off, getting the ball in Debo's hands as much as possible was what was working for the 49ers.
I feel like that's something that I really want Debo in Kansas City just because I think he's the only player
that'd be awesome.
With the juice to
59 rushing attempts.
So 59.
Wow.
I mean, come on. That's really not that much. How many did Tyreek have?
Not even close to that. But
finish your thought.
I mean, Debo's certainly the closest replacement to Tyreek that we could have.
That's how we would, and it looked like that was a lot of how they were using him. I want to know how many times they put him through the tackles. I know they ran him a lot last year. I don't see them getting. They'll figure something out. I would love to see him in Kansas City.
9 rushing attempts
between the tackles.
Well, no, 9 rushing attempts for Tyreek. Sorry.
Big difference.
And let's add in all of those little front flips Mahomes does.
Those are technically passes.
Those are technically
right.
Receptions, PPR folks out there. Those got Mahomes touchdowns and Tyreek receptions for all those owners for years. People actually had to figure that out when they started doing that. Then they
like, holy shit.
People were like, wait, that's
an extra point.
That's a completion. That's a catch.
That's a passing touchdown. Well, Pat gets points for that too.
Funny.
And I think we had an interesting discussion about Debo last week, kind of, and just normal pod prep. And I was considering Debo as the perfect candidate as a sell high guy for your roster. If you got Debo, it's the perfect time to sell high. And my thought process was, if they're going to use him as a running back along with being a wide receiver, they're going to run him into the ground. They're going to wear him out, and I just don't see that longevity lasting. But now with him kind of reversing track and being like, hey, I just want to be a wide receiver. Let me run routes. I'll take 10 handoffs out of the backfield, but not, what was it, 39? 59.
Break it down. It was
like, holy
about
shit.
3.5 rushing attempts per game. So if we break it down that way, it's I think what really made him jump, I think he's using this running back. So he was viral last year. He had tons of huge plays. He was wide receiver and running back top 10 last year. But on 59 attempts in your RB top 10, it's just because he's housing these things. So I think the volume, the yards, and the touchdowns that he put up exacerbated the reality that he's a running back wide receiver. I mean, 59 attempts over 17 games when it breaks out to 3.5 rushing attempts per game. And he was yakking on all of those, which blew up those numbers. So I think he's using that RB tool just as a contract ploy.
Right. He's like, if you got me playing running back and wide receiver, pay me, man. Pay me. Like, and I think they're willing to talk and willing to do stuff with Debo, but it's Debo who's trying to get out of town, maybe wants $25 million a year. We'll see what happens, but a lot's still going to change before the draft, during the draft, maybe right after the draft. So at the wide receiver position, I don't know if we've ever had a more enticing NFL draft, especially when teams like the Packers with Aaron Rodgers and the teams like Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes. I mean, those are ideal fantasy landing spots. And speaking of the Chiefs and wide receivers, Jameson Williams visited the Chiefs on each team has like a top 30 visits with NFL draft picks, so they can bring in 30 guys to visit, come to Kansas City, see them in person, show them around, get a good vibe for who the guy is. And we brought in Jameson Williams last week, guy out of Alabama, played at Ohio State for a couple of years, then transferred to Bama and had that breakout season. He's got potential top 10 pick in this draft, according to Peter Schrager. So if the Chiefs got any interest in him, they're probably going to have to trade up. They will have to trade up.
They're absolutely going to have to trade up. Matt Miller on Twitter actually did like a mock trade proposition for the Kansas City Chiefs, and this is with the Houston Texans. This trade had the Chiefs trading the number 29, number 50, and number 103 to move up to that 13 spot and get their guy, whether it is Jameson Williams or whoever the best receiver at that point is. What are your guys' thoughts on that kind of?
I would love to get J-Mo. I mean, he's got that speed. Like, he's a game breaker, similar to how Tyreek is. And it's just, I think it depends what philosophy Andy Reid and Brett Veach are wanting to go with their wide receiver room. Are they going to try and keep speed? Are they just going to have guys out there that are like Juju? And, I mean, MVS, he's got speed too. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, it seems like that he fits the Chiefs' offense almost better than anybody, you could say. Mm-hmm. And the Chiefs have more draft capital this year than the first 4 seasons of the Brett Veach era. So we all like to think Brett Veach is a draft wizard, and he's able to draft guys that work out. And there's been some bums and some busts there, here and there. But he hasn't had the best luck at the wide receiver position. He's drafted guys like Mecole Hardman, and that was a first-round draft pick, second-round draft pick.
Right around pick 50. I think it was either 40 to 50, somewhere in that ballpark.
And Hardman's been good in this offense, and I think he'll see more volume in the coming years and maybe grow a little bit as well. So I don't think we can't hurt Veach on that pick. But the other guy he picked last year was Cornell Powell. He didn't even make the roster by training camp and was on the practice squad. Mm-hmm. And that was like a 6th, 7th round pick. I don't even remember, but we've never had to draft a wide receiver. So is Veach up to it? Is he willing to draft up and find a guy, or is he willing to just sit and wait for a guy? I can't wait to find out.
He just might be looking, and I've had this hunch the whole time that if Veach identifies there's a big 5 wide receivers this year that are going to be first round draft picks for sure. I'm looking through these top 30 visits that the Chiefs have had. We've had damn near all of those wide receivers. So are we?
Which ones can you name them?
So I'm seeing here we've had Traylon Burks in. We just talked about Jamison Williams. We had Eric Izukanma.
No idea who that is.
Yeah, wide receiver, Texas Tech. Sorry about name pronunciation, but I'm seeing a lot of wide receiver.
Traylon Burks would be a good fit as well. Mm-hmm. He's a guy that Arkansas used in jet sweeps screen game.
He definitely fits this new mold that the Chiefs are doing with bigger, taller receivers.
Christian Watson.
And Burks could fall.
There's Jamison Williams right there. Malik Willis. We'll get into him later on. But we're bringing in, so that's interesting. Out of our top 30 visits, we have brought in
wide receivers.
Let's look at though. Are these the guys that so Traylon Burks? We might think we might be able to sit on him.
Would love it.
Jamison
right there at the 29
Williams on this list. Are we bringing some of these guys in? Some of these top guys? Are we trying to pinpoint? Do we want to go trade up for you? Can you catch these footballs from Patrick Mahomes?
Do you know what I love about this trade? So
the trade with Houston?
Yes. This mock trade with Houston, sending 29, 50, 103. We still have pick 13. We also still have pick 30. We still have a second-round draft pick, and we still have a third-round draft pick and 2 fourth-round draft picks. So it's not like we're selling the farm to move up, the 16 spots.
George Pickens. I have to interject. We brought in George Pickens. Chiefs are drafting one of the prominent wide receivers in this draft class.
Yeah, I like Pickens. I think Pickens has round 1 potential, late round 1, so that'd be a guy that could maybe fall to us. We could wait for him, and we could certainly double tap wide receiver in the second round. I mean, this wide receiver class is deep. I think it's possible we don't need to trade up for a guy. So hopefully Veach got his eyes on a few guys. So we're going to try and move on here. We've got a fun stat here for this episode.
Actually talking about wide receivers.
Yep, this was spot on here with our wide receivers discussion and kind of essentially things you don't want to do. So Zach found this stat here on Twitter, but I'll run through it here. So the most expensive wide receiver room in 2022, it's going to be the New York Giants. They're spending $40.2 million on their wide receiver room. And on top of that, this wide receiver room scored the fewest touchdowns last year, and that was 5 touchdowns, the fewest by any wide receiver room since 2017.
Chiefs too, wasn't it? That was the year that we didn't throw a touchdown pass to a receiver.
That's what I thought when I first looked at that. I was like, maybe that's the Chiefs when we didn't have any touchdowns to wide receivers.
Travis Kelce had plenty of those receiving touchdowns though that year, but that was still
Did we still have Dwayne Bowe at that time?
No,
very
not in 2017.
So again, though, I cannot believe this. This is why the same teams are always the worst.
Kenny Golladay is $20 million of that. I know.
Jesus. So the New York Jets is now the most expensive wide receiver room in the league, and they also contribute the least. Thought that was a fun stat. We know the New York Giants are trash. I mean, they've got Daniel Jones. They got 2 picks in the top 10. So it'll be interesting to see.
Is on the bench, Tony.
Yep, Kadarius Toney, that rookie from last year out of Florida.
Paid the least.
Yep, still on that rookie contract. Players attending the draft this year: Olave, Garrett Wilson, Jameson Williams, Drake London, Matt Corral, Malik Willis. Always fun to see these guys at the draft. Always fun to see who slides and who's sitting around waiting for that phone call. So will be interesting to see how the draft shakes out. They all look like round 1 guys. I think maybe Matt Corral, does he go round 1? I think he could.
We were.
But who sees the biggest slide?
I think these quarterbacks. I think those 2 QBs just might find themselves sitting there at the end of the night still. Everyone remember when Lamar Jackson was the last pick of the first round and the camera just kept clicking over to Lamar. He was supposed to be top 10. How could he go past the top 20?
I remember the reporter asked him a question just waiting for him to dog on his pick and how long he's been waiting around, and he's like, I'm just ready to play football. So, I mean, that's all these guys want. They just want to get drafted, have a chance. But, I mean, they are all expected to go in round 1, so it's always interesting to see who slides. And That's an interesting topic, Vin. I mean, how many QBs are going to be drafted this year? We saw 5 go in the top 15 last year, which was an absurd quarterback class. This quarterback class is nothing like last year. But I could still see 3 or 4 guys going in the first round.
If we set the over/under at 3, what do you think happens? Do you think
I take the over. I think 4.
Do you think the 4 would go?
Big under.
I think you got Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis could easily both go top 10, and then you throw in Corral, Ritter, somewhere else down the road in that round 1.
I just have to sincerely disagree. I think if a quarterback is taken in the first round, yes, that's if. Coming from me here, it's Malik Willis, and it's probably to the Steelers, is everything that I've seen.
I would love that landing spot.
That would make sense. That would get me a little bit more excited about Malik Willis. But if we're looking at those QBs from last year, all 5 of those names were big time names. Everybody knew these names coming out of last season. This year, you only know these quarterbacks if you're a devout college football fan, or if you've really been doing your research coming up to the draft here. Malik Willis, your average fan, never heard of him. Kenny Pickett, he had a great year last year. Your average fan, never heard of him. Desmond Ritter was in the Final Four last year. How many people could answer who was Cincinnati's quarterback?
Not a lot, probably. He was a 4-year starter.
The most recognizable name, and that's just because he was getting that hype that all those guys last year were getting, and was the apparent reason Sam Howell wanted to go back a year was he was at the end of that long list of stars. I'm not high on this class. I'm taking the fat under. Vegas says 3. I say under. I would set it at 2, but I don't work in odd setting. I'll take that under.
And you're firmly in the camp of if you want to draft a quarterback in this rookie draft this year in your dynasty league, I mean, you're not willing to take a shot on any guy.
Me personally,
I mean, if you're desperate enough, you would. But
so I can see
if you're okay at the quarterback position, you're not going to take one of these guys.
A Malik Willis in Pittsburgh is a little bit more enticing. I think landing spot's huge for QB, but just me personally in this league, I have Josh Allen, Russell Wilson, and Kirk Cousins, all of which are going to give me Kirk is going to give me at least 3 years of solid backup play. I'm perfectly content with Russ and Josh. So
you can just wait.
Personally, no, but
you can just wait and pick a guy next year.
One.
Right, you don't need to pick a quarterback this
year.
Way
better QBs coming next year. Way better.
Zach, how are you eyeing this quarterback class in your rookie draft coming up?
I view it a little bit higher just because my current roster only has 1 quarterback. I only have
Justin Herbert.
I only have Justin Herbert going for me right now.
Yeah, 1 quarterback in a super flex league, Zachary. Oh boy.
Well, I traded away Aaron Rodgers. I traded away Aaron Rodgers for the 1/6 this year in a 10 league or 10.
Is it the 107?
Might be 107, yeah.
Because I think you picked right before me.
Yeah,
I'm in the 108.
So I have the 109, 107, and 202.
2 first-round picks.
Yeah, I have 2 first-round picks and the 202. I'm looking at targeting 1 receiver or maybe a running. Maybe if someone like Kenneth Walker is available at one of those positions. But personally, I would look at if I can get a quarterback at 109 and another quarterback at 202. I'm there to stack my quarterback room.
Who are those guys, though?
Who are those quarterbacks?
Who would you take there?
Probably Pickett.
Two of them?
You could have Kenny Pickett
and Howell.
Ritter.
Maybe
there.
Ritter, yeah.
Malik Willis probably be off the board by then, most likely. And that's one thing I'm super interested to see with our league. We just did the startup last year, and being a super flex league, I mean, these quarterbacks should go early in round 1, but I mean, how early is this draft, this class going to go this year?
I'm super low on these quarterbacks, if that's not obvious, so just full disclosure there.
And we'll kind of get into my guys. We got a couple of guys that we all are kind of linked to if we needed to hitch our boat to. Before we kind of get into my guys, Drake London finally had his pro day. He opted to not run the 40 time. He just ran routes. He said he looked healthy. He said he's about 95% healthy since his ankle injury, a devastating ankle fracture towards the end of the season last year at USC. I think he's still a top 10 pick. I mean, I think he goes right there at number 10 to the Jets if I had to choose today. So Drake London, I know I've got Drake London in my top 2 wide receivers probably. He kind of go either way. I know Nick and Zach were high on him. We'll kind of get into that as well. But we'll kind of start the my guys here.
Before that, I do just want to go over, just because we've kind of been talking about this. So this is from Peter Schrager. We've talked about him a couple times now already this pod. This is his NFL.com mock draft. This was updated, just April 19th, so just yesterday. He has Kenny Pickett going number 6 to the Carolina Panthers. He has Malik Willis going 20 to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And he has Matt Corral going to the Detroit Lions at 32.
Damn, so just 3.
Just 3 of them, yep.
Pickett goes off the board way before Willis there. That's interesting.
I honestly think you can probably see those two flip-flop, just because I don't think any teams kind of there in the middle need a quarterback. But
neither do they when you got what's coming next year. I mean, they already have sufficient Band-Aids. They're not contending for a Super Bowl. If they're going to be picking where they're picking this year, which you would think they are, Detroit's going to be picking high next year. The Steelers are kind of a bleep show, if you will, especially at the QB position. I just feel like you might as well just get value at other positions and wait for next year's quarterbacks. Next year's quarterbacks are much, much better. And I'm not taking it. Arizona took Josh Rosen in the first round a couple years ago because they had to take a quarterback. They thought that was their need, and Josh Rosen was the last one left. The very next year, they draft Kyler Murray. Just threw away a first-round pick. Who could they have taken 10th overall there and just waited for next year? You're not going to win a Super Bowl. Then all of those teams have Band-Aids in place. Jared Goff is a perfectly good quarterback. The Steelers, maybe not, but I'd still just write it off and wait for another year. I just don't like these guys enough. I don't think any of these guys are. And again, I'm super low on them.
And landing spot will be huge. As soon as we know landing spot for these guys, we might be able to convince ourselves of 1 or 2 of these guys to actually go out there and draft and rely on them in year 1.
I agree.
Jordan Love.
So we might take a quick break here before we dig into the my guys. So we will be right back. All right, and we're back and ready to get into the my guys portion of the podcast. My guys are guys that we're going to hang our hat on, the guys that we're going to possibly draft ourselves if they fall to us, and guys that we think are going to be good year 1 and for the foreseeable future. We're going to start at the wide receiver position. My guy for the wide receiver position is a guy out of Arkansas. He is a 6'2", 225-pound wide receiver, Treylon Burks. I've got him as my wide receiver 1 in this whole class. I could see it going a couple different ways. I see him at maybe 2 or 3, but I've got him as my number 1, my guy, Treylon Burks at the wide receiver position. He's a guy out of Arkansas that was used in a variety of ways. I think landing spots can be big for Treylon. If he goes to a place like the Chiefs or the Packers, a creative offense that is willing to use him in different ways, like he was at Arkansas, he's certainly going to be successful. And he's kind of fallen since his combine performance. He ran a 4.55 at the combine, and maybe not the fastest for the wide receiver position, but you watch his highlight reels. I mean, he's outrunning Alabama safeties and corners to score touchdowns. This guy is game speed fast, and Treylon Burks would be a guy I would be thrilled with to have on my roster.
So your biggest thing with Treylon Burks is not necessarily, obviously he has the skills. Everyone here has the skills, but you're valuing his potential landing spot falling somewhere there in the early to mid 20s, getting with someone like a Green Bay, maybe the Chiefs trading up and getting him, but some solidified good offense. You're valuing his landing spot more so than maybe someone like a Chris Olave or Garrett Wilson, who maybe has slightly better footwork, maybe some breakaway speed like Jameson Williams, but you're valuing that landing spot as opposed to someone going super early, sticking with the Jets, going to the Giants, going with one of those early picks. That's your big thing?
Exactly. With him possibly falling in the first round, and that gives him a better chance of going to a better team, a more win-now team, a team with better assets, a team with a better quarterback. And he's going to find himself in a better situation year 1 possibly. And I like the potential upside. I mean, A.J. Brown is an awesome comparison that I like to compare Treylon Burks to. Other guys like Jordy Nelson, Dwayne Bowe, Eric Decker, Brandon Marshall, Kenny Galladay, even Debo Samuel. I think he can provide some stuff out of the backfield as well. He's just kind of a do-it-all guy. He's got big hands. He didn't have the biggest 40, the biggest vertical. He's got 33-inch vertical jump, but he's a big guy, so I don't think that's going to hurt him too much. He's just a guy you can just throw the ball to, and you know that he's got a chance to come down with it. And I think he's got the speed that's going to translate to the NFL. And I think Chiefs are a dream landing spot for him.
I'll agree with that. I'm going to go with a guy who maybe has a similar size and stature to Treylon Burks. My guy, personally, is going to be Drake London in this draft class. He is coming off an injury, which I think teams might see as a negative. He, like we mentioned earlier, he didn't run his 40 time at his pro day. He didn't attend the combine. He essentially just went out there, ran routes against no defense, or if he did have a guy guarding him, a weak defense. So my biggest thing with Drake London is I do think he has the skills and the assets, as not opposed to someone like a Treylon Burks, but I just think he has that it factor. If it wouldn't be Drake London for me, I do think Jameson Williams would be my backup guy, just because I think he has that Tyreek-esque breakaway speed. He knows how to blow by defenders. It seems like they talk about this with Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes doesn't run, like his fastest point isn't A to B, it's actually a curve. And I kind of feel like that's how Jameson Williams is. He'll like do one stutter step around a defender and somehow gets further, even though that defender's going in a straight line. So that's kind of what I see when I watch Jameson Williams as well. It's kind of a 1A, 1B for me there.
Well, I also have Drake London, and for me, it's all about monster facts and stats with this guy. So, 6'4", monstrous. This dude was the Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year. Only played 8 games. That's a monster stat. He had the most contested catches in all of college football last year. Again, 8 games. Monstrous. I love Drake London. Gonna be having to call this dude. He might be the new Big Ben. Pun, guys. The clock in England. Big Ben.
Yeah, I don't see it.
Drake London.
Oh, there we go. Yeah,
that was brutal. That was fucking horrible. I'm leaving it in.
Can't keep up
I'm
with these
leaving it
landmarks,
in. That was the worst fucking joke anyone's ever.
Where do you think Big Ben's original name came from? It's a big ass clock in England.
I just thought Ben Roethlisberger as soon as you said that.
What's Drake London's middle name? We'll start calling him by that.
What a name though, Drake London.
I think his first name is William and his middle name's Drake.
Hey, not a bad way to go about it.
William Drake London, maybe that's the nickname.
London Drake. Wouldn't that be cooler?
Cut that. We don't. I don't know who that person is.
Yeah,
that was a made up name.
I'm a big fan of Drake London too. I think he could easily be the first wide receiver off the board. I would love for him to go to the Jets, obviously. And he dominated his freshman season when guys like Amon-Ra were there. There's another wide receiver there at the time. Michael Pittman was there as well, and he still produced while having these elite NFL
was a whole wide receiver room.
And Drake London produced out the ass his freshman year, so he competed for targets and still came through better on the other side.
I think having multiple years of high-level production for Drake London is a huge selling point for me as well. A lot of these guys, Jameson Williams, 1 year of dominant production. Olave and Wilson, kind of same boat. They only have that 1 year of dominant production. So for me, it is the having multiple years of elite level production in a good conference at a good team.
Yeah, he covers every box. He's got that early breakout age. He's got that dominant sharing target rate. And the biggest knock on him is maybe his speed and that he's not as good at yards after catch. But you pull up any highlight reel of Drake London, he's breaking tackles. He takes screens for 20, 30 yards. Like, the dude's able to break tackles, and he's hard to bring down. He is a skinny. He's around 210. What is he, 6? What's his height?
I can pull it up here. I was looking at this. Drake's
6'4", 219. He's only 20 years old, so I think that's a good my guy there.
Yeah, he hasn't
I
even
view
turned
him
21.
I view him and Treylon Burks kind of in the same tier. Really, we'll just have to depend on that landing spot. So moving over to the running back, my guys. My guy at the running back position is Rachaad White out of Arizona State. His college stats, he had 224 carries at Arizona State, 1,400 yards rushing, 22 total touchdowns. He had a college dominator rating of 37.8. 40 time is at 4.48. He's a really good receiving back. He reminds me a lot of Le'Veon Bell. I've got him as my running back 3 overall in the class. And I think draft capital will depend whether or not if he goes early round 2 or late round 2 in rookie mock draft or rookie drafts. But if he's a 3rd round back, I'm willing to take a stab on him with my 2nd round pick.
I agree with that. I like that you weren't just going with who everyone's guy should be. This is going to be my guy, Breece Hall. I enjoy that you kind of went outside the box there. Someone outside of the big 3 kind of right now are Breece Hall, Isaiah Spiller, and Kenneth Walker III.
Right. I think one thing that hurts Rachaad White a lot is the dude's 23 years old right now. So he's coming into the league as an older back. He went the JUCO route and eventually made his way to Arizona State and broke out. So, but he's a good receiving back for PPR purposes, and I'd be excited if you can have him on your team, if you can draft him maybe middle, 2nd round. Mm-hmm. So I think Rachaad White, that's my guy at the running back position. What do you guys got at running back?
So, as I mentioned, I have Breece Hall here for me. Dude just balled out in his 3 years there at Iowa State. I think he was kind of snubbed for Heisman, not a Heisman trophy, but at least a Heisman trip to New York.
A nomination.
Yeah,
he for sure was.
Not this year.
He was in the Doak Walker discussion.
Yeah, I think he was snubbed this year.
He's been at Iowa State.
Look. So here are his stats. The 3 years he was there at Iowa State. So year 1, 897 rushing yards, 9 touchdowns, 252 receiving yards, 1 touchdown. So he had almost 1,150 yards total, averaging about 5.5 yards per touch. 2020, this is when he did get the Heisman nomination. 1,500, almost 1,600 rushing yards, averaging 5.6 yards a carry. That is stupid. 21 touchdowns.
Oh, he's a touchdown machine.
21 touchdowns, 180 receiving yards, 2 more touchdowns. He averaged 5.8 yards per touch. And then in 2020, he again almost 1,500 yards, 5.8 yards per rush, 20 touchdowns, and then total scrimmage yards, 1,775 again, averaging about 6.1 yards per touch. This dude just knows how to get yards. He gets yak. A lot of it isn't just open space running. It is yards after contact. It is, he has great moves. He ran, a 4.3 at the combine?
4.39 at the combine, which lands him in the 96th percentile.
I think this dude's going to ball out. A lot of projections I've seen have him going to, the Buffalo Bills. And, I think for him in college, I do think since he was such a hot target, he had 280, 253, 186 rushing attempts. I think when you're sitting behind Singletary, not sitting behind, but splitting time with Singletary.
At least to start the season.
He's not going to get banged and bruised. He's going to be able to develop in the offense. He's going to be able to learn how the game is played at the NFL level. And he's just, I honestly see him just going out and balling.
It could be an identical scenario of how Jonathan Taylor came into the league.
Yeah.
Where he had Marlon Mack in front of him, and obviously things shifted quickly with Marlon Mack going down with an injury towards Achilles. So Jonathan Taylor came in, and he was that clear-cut number 1, but they still had other guys there, and Jonathan Taylor felt his way. Now he's the number 1 running back in all of fantasy football. So I'm big on Breece Hall as well. I mean, he's definitely that best, I think, consensus between all 3 of us. He's that best running back available, and I think he definitely is in consideration for that 101 pick in Dynasty, Superflex leagues, and just one quarterback leagues as well. And we've been kind of going through with player profile as well, which is they kind of put together comparable players and comparisons, and this is fun to go through. So according to player profile, the top comparable players to Breece Hall: Jonathan Taylor, Adrian Peterson, Herschel Walker, LaDainian Tomlinson, Saquon Barkley, and that main player play style comp is DeMarco Murray. So you hear all of those guys, and I mean, this guy
nasty runner.
is a smash. So I don't think the landing spot doesn't matter as much with running backs as it does with wide receivers and quarterbacks. Wide receivers, I don't think landing spot matters too much as well. But Breece Hall, I'm a big fan as well.
There, I'll kind of disagree with you, actually, just because you see guys like Saquon Barkley. He was drafted top 5, and he was supposed to be the guy in New York, and they just kept feeding him the ball, and
burn him out.
Your body, at the NFL level, your body just can't handle it, and I think a lot of NFL teams are starting to realize that, and that's why you see a lot of these running back by committees. You see the Chiefs, they have CEH, they have Rojo, they had Derek McKinnon, they had Darrell Williams, they had Damian Williams, all at the same time, with CEH kind of being their primary back.
Bills like to do that. The Eagles like to do that. The 49ers like to do that.
Patriots
Miami Dolphins like to do that.
Yeah,
Patriots like to do that.
I think you're seeing a lot of this running back by committee, and I don't think you should let that deter you from drafting this guy 101 either, just because I think he has the skills to be that guy. I mean, you mentioned all of his player profiles. I see a lot of not CEH, but I see a lot of blue eyes white privilege. I see him being a very valuable kind of receiving guy out of the backfield. We mentioned all of his stats.
Now, I think an interesting question with Breece Hall is if he gets round 1 draft capital, is he automatically a top 10 dynasty running back? In dynasty startups, he goes first round. I'm not talking about any landing spot. I'm just talking about draft capital. He goes round 1. Does he does he go right into that discussion as a top 10 dynasty running back?
I think regardless of where he goes, he's going to be top 10. I've seen him anywhere between RB5 and RB7.
I agree with that. I think he's going to be a smash. And Vinna, who do you got there as your running back, my guy?
Well, it is cool to see the Kansas boy, Breece Hall, Wichita, Kansas. The only place I've ever seen Breece Hall get stopped was by St. Thomas Aquinas High School. Shut him down. Probably negative rushing yards that game anyway. Really cool to see him being that clear-cut number 1. But Dynasty is all about, fantasy football in general, all about running backs. It almost always is. And if you're looking at strictly a rookie draft, there's not a lot of action with these running backs. So
there's really only one guy outside of Breece Hall.
And Breece is going 1-1. So unless you have 1-1, you better start thinking elsewhere. Whether you're looking at those receivers, I don't like those quarterbacks. Others can disagree there. But if you're going to get a running back and you don't got 1-1, you got to get Walk 3, which is Kenneth Walker III. So this dude, 2 years at Wake Forest, and he transfers to Michigan State. He supplants Breece Hall, actually, as the best running back in college football if we're just looking on paper. I believe he led the country in yards last year at 1,636, 1,636 rushing yards. He had 19 touchdowns, 1 receiving, so that's 20 total. 40-yard dash, 4.38. So I'm not sure where he'll go. I'm sure once Breece Hall goes, Walk 3 is probably going to go shortly after that.
I see second round.
In the real-life NFL draft.
Second round for him, real life.
Depending about those wide receivers, I really like those 5 wide receivers. I think you take any of them and you sprinkle Walk 3 anywhere in there, just depending on how your roster is looking like. If you need a running back, take him earlier. If you maybe don't, go for some of those receivers. But he is RB2, and he needs to be taken in the first round.
Yep, if you need a running back, there's not a lot of guarantees outside of Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker. And even with Kenneth Walker, there's a lot of receiving ability questions. He didn't do a whole lot of it at Michigan State, and I'm not saying he's incapable of it, but I mean, if he didn't want to, if the Michigan State didn't want to use him in the passing game, then I think that shows a lot.
He never fumbled in college.
That'll get you drafted.
All 3 years, yep.
Who was the Chiefs running back infamously that had never fumbled? It was Kareem.
Kareem
never fumbled, and this dude fumbled in his first game, right? It was his first carry.
First carry.
Kareem Hunt did. Yep, I remember that. He still had a monster game that game. It was against the Pats.
Yeah, it was week 1 Pats.
We'd have back-to-back Super Bowls. Throwing it back.
Probably have 3 straight, if we're being honest.
Because Kareem was our whole run game that year. We really didn't have any other committee behind him. And Kareem was he was at his best.
Absolutely. Now he was just a 3rd-round draft pick, and Kenneth Walker is probably going to go around before that. So Rachaad White kind of falls into that 3rd-round category. If he does get that, I view him and kind of similar to Kareem Hunt as well. Those are our running back keepers. We'll kind of move on to the quarterback position. My guy is Desmond Ridder, a 4-year starter at Cincinnati. Had a really good career in college. He always had a winning record. I've got him as my quarterback 2 in this class, right behind Malik Willis, personally. He's got a little bit of a run game to him as well, which is good for fantasy purposes. And there's been a lot of talk about him being the most pro-ready, whether it's pre-snap, during snap, just kind of getting his guys in the right spots and reading defenses. I think he's ready to roll. With that rushing upside, I mean, if he gets a good landing spot, I like Desmond Ridder a lot. I think he will go 1st round, but I wouldn't be surprised if you see him go off in the 2nd round as well. But Desmond Ridder is my guy there for my quarterback position.
You mentioned his kind of pre-post snap recognition. He had some crazy stat that was somewhat similar to Patrick Mahomes' touchdown to interception ratios against blitzes, right. Correct?
Yeah, eventually teams stopped blitzing Mahomes.
Right.
And the past 2 seasons, Desmond Ridder has a touchdown interception ratio of 28-1 against the blitz. So
that's going to be huge. That is like you said, like teams recognize that, and unless you have a strong front and you can't blitz, I mean, obviously once you get into the NFL, defenses are completely different. It's a whole nother level of speed. There's a lot more confusion. Teams are going to do whatever it takes to kind of confuse you. The defensive coordinators are geniuses, but if you're able to recognize kind of what that defense is doing against you, and that's not something that you can just lose. I don't think that's just some instinct that you have. You can recognize that.
It'll certainly translate to the NFL.
Yeah, I think that's something that'll be very valuable. And like we said, yeah, he was a Final Four contestant in the college football playoff. He was the quarterback for Cincinnati. I mean, there's something to say. I mean, he balled out. Cincinnati was a great team with him as their quarterback. I have no.
He didn't lose a lot of football games in his career.
He was a winner.
Yep, I'm certainly high on him. Got him as my number 2 quarterback overall behind Malik Willis. So that's a guy I'd be willing to take. Super flex leagues, you might need to take him in round 2. Every league's going to be a little bit different. I think that's one thing we're certainly interested in for our league, is see how many quarterbacks go off in those first 2 rounds. But if you're quarterback needy and you want to maybe try and grab a guy at decent value instead of reaching for a guy like Malik Willis, I think Desmond Ridder might be your guy.
Yeah, my guy is Malik Willis. I think there's just too many intangibles there. He's a bit more raw of a prospect, but I think he has a lot of those intangibles. It's just going to take a little bit of refining for him to kind of get to be NFL ready. You might be struggling for a year or so, but I really like him. I like his production. He balled out in his pro day. We will kind of see what we see, but he was a stats monster. The 1 year he had elite level production. Nick, who do you have there as your guy for the quarterback position?
Well, I mean, I would have to say I'm definitely going way against the curve here. If I'm taking a quarterback, and you've heard me say a couple times tonight that I really do not like any of these quarterbacks. My comp team personally, again, Josh Allen, Russell Wilson, Kirk Cousins, I'm perfectly good there, especially if I can replace Kirk next year. Maybe there'll be a number of better guys next year. Anyway, I mean, I would probably take Malik if I'm actually going to pick a quarterback, which I'm not. But who I really, really on the low like is Sam Howell, North Carolina. Big fall off this year, but if I'm looking at his past 2 years. So he ends his career at North Carolina as the record holder there for passing yards, touchdowns. He really only fell off after losing a bunch of really good football players right now. Javonte Williams, who was his receiver, Drake?
Sam Howell. Yeah, De'Ami Brown, who was a rookie last year.
So he lost some weapons. You know who else lost weapons and fell off in his last year in college? Josh Allen. Josh Allen had a number of NFL weapons leave Wyoming. His numbers fell off big time. The Bills drafted him. We all know what happened next. I would draft Malik again if I was drafting a quarterback, but I wouldn't be surprised if Sam Howell. I implore everyone to actually open his numbers and read through those.
They're crazy.
I'm imploring our audience. I was actually shocked myself.
All 5 of our listeners.
I was first. Sam Howell only came to my attention because my boy Rattler Snake and Sam Howell the year before were both coming into this year, which I guess is the year before. Cut that. These guys were coming in being talked about as your QB 1 and 2 coming out this year, and I don't see Spencer Rattler or Sam Howell on anyone at the top of anyone's draft boards this year. But seriously, open Sam Howell's numbers and look through these. ACC Rookie of the Year, 2-time ACC First Team, North Carolina High School. I mean, this is a high school record, but it's still, there's 50 damn states, folks. And
these are awards, not stats.
The one where he's from, he has the high school record for offensive yards. Sure, I like numbers. If anyone's going to work out, I think it's Sam Howell. I think he's a pro type player, and he's athletic enough to scramble when he can. Depends where he goes.
He had 92.
What they want out of him.
He had 92 passing touchdowns in his career at UNC, which is 3rd in ACC history.
23 interceptions. I mean,
you can keep just like reading through that. I was like, what?
My biggest thing, and I know we mentioned that losing the weapons is obviously a huge part of, his downgrade. But I mean, even if you look at, so he was at North Carolina from 2019 to 2021. As a freshman, he threw for 3,600 yards. As a sophomore, he threw for 3,500 yards. And then as a junior, he threw for just under 3,100 yards. So there was a steady decrease in production there. Same with touchdowns. 38 touchdowns freshman, 30 touchdowns as a sophomore, and 24 touchdowns as a junior. And his interceptions were the same freshman, sophomore, and then increased as a junior. Do you think he's a product of what his offensive weapons allowed him to be? Obviously, you're only as good as your receivers. But if you're not, like someone like Patrick Mahomes, we always say that he's able to elevate the level of his receivers. Do you see this guy being able to come into, I don't know where he's projected to go, probably somewhere in the 2nd or 3rd rounds, I would assume, of NFL mock drafts, not necessarily a dynasty draft. I mean, do you think he can go in somewhere and sit behind someone for a year and then come in and ball out and be that guy? What are your...
I mean, I don't see why not. I mean, if we're looking at all of these quarterbacks on this list, Sam Howell has the best career. He's the best collegiate career by far. Actually, if we're looking at it, the only person that might hold a candle is Desmond Ridder. Every other one of these guys had a big stat year this year. And that's not to say, I mean, Joe Burrow was one of those guys who just came up out of nowhere and made himself a star. But like Malik Willis, he just had his first big year. Kenny Pickett just had his first big... Kenny Pickett threw more touchdowns this year than the previous 3 years. He's a 4-year starter. Mm-hmm. He threw more touchdowns this year than the previous 3 combined. So all of these guys just had big year. Matt Corral, he just comes up out of nowhere. He has this one big year in Josh Levy's air raid offense, bringing it to Norman. Let's go. But Sam Howell has put in 3 solid years, and you've been hearing about Sam Howell for 3 years now.
Yeah, I completely agree. You mentioned Desmond Ridder. I just pulled up his stat line here. He was a 4-year starter there in Cincinnati. Only had 1 year.
I'm talking myself into Sam Howell as I do this shit. I've said it the whole time, but I'm just actually convincing myself more and more.
He's got a little rushing upside to him as well. He
does.
He's got a little juice there.
But going back, comparing to Desmond Ritter only has 1 year. It was his senior and final year of more than 3,000 passing yards. He only had 1 season throwing 30 or more touchdowns. He was there for 4 years and had fewer touchdown passes than Sam Howell had in his 3 years there, and he had more interceptions. Obviously, that's just because he was there for a 4th season. But like you said, Desmond Ritter is just a known winner. Sam Howell in the ACC, you could argue it's
numbers.
He did have numbers.
Those are fantasy numbers if that translates.
When I watch Sam Howell, I think Baker Mayfield, and that's who Player Profile has as his play style comp is Baker Mayfield, and I think he's got a little bit more rushing ability than Baker Mayfield, not by a lot, but I view them very similarly. And I know other guys that they've got him as comparable: Sam Darnold, Jared Stidham, Case Keenum, Jimmy Garoppolo, Teddy Bridgewater, all guys that are still in the NFL or guys that had shots in the NFL. And I think Sam Howell would certainly get a shot in the NFL, and you'd be able to get him at good value because you're kind of looking at him as the 4th or 5th wide receiver in this or quarterback in this draft.
I agree. I think there's a lot of boom or bust potential here in this quarterback class. And I guess you can say that with anything. Yeah, there's boom or bust potential, but I see the upside for someone like a Malik Willis being super high. There's if you can go in, if you get Sam Howell and you can get that kind of production, averaging around 35 to 3,800 yards, 20 touchdowns as a starter in the NFL. I mean, those are borderline Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins numbers, who are perennial top 12 fantasy football players.
Right.
So.
And I think one of the trickiest things to do in this process, trying to grade these guys and get an idea of how you value them before the NFL draft, is you can make a case for all of these guys and a reason to like them. Mm-hmm. You pull on a highlight tape, they're highlight tapes for a reason. You're going to see them making plays. You're going to find something that you like and something that you're going to latch onto. So it's tricky kind of deciphering and going through these profiles and figuring out who's going to actually be successful. But, I mean, we don't do this for a living, and even pro scouts, I mean, they mess up sometimes. I mean, plenty of quarterbacks have been drafted and don't work out. So it's just exactly. There's plenty of them, and I think you can find a reason to like all these guys. So, but these are my guys, and I think we want to kind of mention a few sleepers here as well, guys that maybe aren't as talked about as much and are maybe late round 2, 3rd round possible draft picks in your rookie drafts in your dynasty leagues. My sleeper, I think we've all got one here, I believe, but my sleeper is Wan'Dale Robinson out of Kentucky. He played his first 2 years at Nebraska before he transferred to Kentucky. He is a 5'8", 178-pound wide receiver. He's 21 years of age. He's got speed to him. He can take guys one-on-one. He can take jet sweeps out of the backfield. And I just loved how Kentucky used him. I got a front row seat, essentially, as a Mizzou fan, watching him play. And Wan'Dale Robinson destroyed us. So I think Wan'Dale Robinson could have a very good career in the NFL.
I haven't watched any tape on him, but if he looks like a guy, there's a good chance he's a guy. You just need to...
I think a good comparison for Wan'Dale is Rondale Moore, who was a rookie last year at the Arizona Cardinals. And he's certainly a guy that if he falls to you in your 3rd round, I mean, I think this year a good draft strategy to have, and is something I'll be walking into my rookie drafts with, is if I've got late round picks, I'm probably going to try and take a stab on a wide receiver. And Rondale Moore is going to be at the top, or Wan'Dale Robinson is going to be at the top of that list for me. A guy I can snag late and see production from in various different ways.
Nick, who do you have as your guy?
I have to go with, I have to be a homer here. We're going to go Kennedy Brooks of the Oklahoma Sooners. This is a guy that you'll be able to pick up after the draft. We'll see where he goes and where he lands. But this is someone that he's probably not going to get drafted. and he's someone that you just might be able to go pick up and let him chill on your roster.
He won't get drafted in rookie drafts. That's what you're saying?
He's going to go real. There'll be a.
He'll be a 4th round pick. He'll be a 4th round pick for sure.
He might not get a. He'll be drafted by an NFL team. In a fantasy draft, he might not be.
Well, no.
And yeah, he's someone that you just might be able to go.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to go day 2 or day 3, I think.
As an Oklahoma fan who watched pretty much every single one of his football games, he is an animal. And when people stand out, they stand out. It's what I was just saying. Drake noticed Wandale. If they stand out, they stand out. Kennedy Brooks just seemed like he had a force field around him. He would just get hit. He doesn't go down. We would toss him the ball a little bit. He's not going to be a receiving back in the pros. He's going to be ground and pound. He took that COVID year off. That first year when they were offering players to take the year off without any scholarship penalties, he took that off. So that's a whole year that he rested up his body and did nothing but work out and get stronger. He's not taking any hits. And he came right back. He led the Sooners in rushing, completely dominated football games. He's someone that is probably not going to get drafted, and you can go add him to your roster, like immediately post-draft. And if anyone here does that...
Well, now that you mention it, he's going to get drafted. It's going to be a late 3rd round pick for somebody now.
Zach took Ramondre from me last year on the same logic. That one's still cooking.
I've offered trades and you've denied them, so...
They're not good enough.
What do you mean they're not good enough? That's neither here nor there. My guy is my sleeper guy, I guess.
I love this, my guy.
It is definitely an
Sleeper.
out there. It is very much a sleeper. It might be someone you have to pick up off the waiver wire after we see some level of production. I'm not saying go out and draft this guy even with your last pick in the rookie draft. I'm talking about a guy out of Baylor, Tyquan Thornton. He came out and balled at the NFL Combine running a 4.28 40.
That's the 100th percentile.
Mm-hmm. He is a speed demon. If you look at his highlight film in his final year at Baylor, I mean, you can see that speed on full display. You see it running his fade routes, just blowing by some cornerbacks and safeties. You can see it with him running slants and just blowing by linebackers and then getting there into running into the end zone, again, running by cornerbacks and safeties. I would say his biggest knock against him is, I mean, he never had a year for receiving more than 1,000 yards. He had 10 touchdown catches last year, which is pretty good for a receiver. I think for this guy, like I said, I'm a big Big 12 guy. I think this is someone who, depending on where he lands, I think he has the speed and the ability. I mean, he's 6'2", almost 185 pounds, somewhere like that. So it's not like he's a little guy. He's not like a Tyreek Hill or Mecole Hardman, one of these small, fast receivers. He is a big dude who runs fast. I think he's someone that you keep an eye on, see where he's drafted at here this upcoming week. And, you know, if he's somewhere good, keep him on your radar. I think he could be someone that really stands out. Someone you pick up, like I said, pick up on the waiver wire, leave him on a taxi squad if you have one, leave him on a rookie squad if you have it. But I think he's someone that has really high potential, or he could just end up being another speed demon in the NFL who ends up being, you know, some team's 3rd or 4th string wide receiver.
What did John Ross run? If this dude ran a 4.28, what did John Ross run to? Because that would have been breaking news, right? That if someone ran the fastest. That's still John?
Yeah, John Ross is still 4.22.
And I loved that about him. I was all over him that year. He obviously hasn't panned out.
To put it in perspective, Tyreek Hill ran a 4.29 at the combine.
Damn, 4.22.
What was John's?
4.22.
Oh, and that's a big difference.
That's moving.
It really is. Like it really, when you're talking in the 4.2 range, that is actually a huge difference.
NFL teams love the speed. I mean, they're going to overpay for those guys.
Mm-hmm.
So he could see draft capital on that alone. So it'd be interesting to see.
That speed you just burst out of a route like that. Like, how many times did Tyreek there would be times corners would always be trying to think about, is he going to put a move on me? Is he going to cut? Is he going to do a million things? And on this particular time, he's just going their worst nightmare.
The ceiling for Thornton's got to be like solid wide receiver 3 upside on a team. I think he's comparable to a guy, and this is what Player Profile has comparable players of him is Robbie Anderson, Quez Watkins, Darius Slayton. I think he fits into that mold very well, and an injury or two could happen to that wide receiver core on whatever team he's in, and then he could automatically be a perfect flex spot.
Kind of like what KJ Osborne was last year when you saw some injuries there in Minnesota. Like, he came in and he was just a touchdown machine in the few weeks that, white guy?
Yep, Thielen was out, and the Irv Smith got injured early in the season, so there's a lot of receptions available, and a guy like KJ Osborne took advantage, and I don't think Thornton's much different.
You said Darius Slayton. I mean, he just happens to be a part of the most expensive wide receiver room this year. And can we break down these contracts? I want to. It doesn't make sense.
Let's look it up. Well,
I want to.
This
is
actually pissing me off. Nick, you look that up. We kind of talked about who our sleepers are, who our my guys are. Drake, do you just kind of want to go through, or I guess we can both go through?
Yeah, we can kind of go back and forth here, but we kind of came up with a consensus DNZ rookie rankings between the three of us at each position. So we kind of made our own rankings and then kind of came together and made adjustments to kind of come together as one consensus ranking. So we did put Drake London at our number 1 wide receiver spot. Like we mentioned, he checks all the boxes: early breakout rate, age, college dominator rating. He's a guy that's going to be a difference maker at the wide receiver position. So Drake London's at wide receiver 1 for us. And here at number 2, which I think I have Treylon Burks kind of in that 1 to 2 range, but consensus shook out to having Jameson Williams there at number 2. And Jameson Williams, he's off that ACL injury he suffered in the national championship game, but ACL injuries are kind of a thing of the past. It's not a thing that teams get super worried about nowadays, and there's times where guys come back stronger than before.
Oh, yeah. It's kind of like what they say with baseball pitchers and Tommy John surgery. Like, you always come back stronger from that. I think the biggest thing you can say about Jameson Williams is, yes, he had one hell of a breakout season there in Alabama. He compiled 1,572 receiving yards. Almost 20 yards per reception, which is just incredible.
And that's kind of the argument against him, is that when he was at Ohio State, he didn't produce over guys like Olave and Garrett Wilson and Jackson Smith and Jigba. But as soon as he goes to Alabama, like, the dude was he was the best wide receiver in the country last year. I think that's totally fair to say.
Yeah.
And you kind of, like, maybe since he couldn't outplay and get more running time and more snaps than Olave and Wilson, maybe we should just automatically have J-Mo below those guys. But I don't see it that way. Ohio State's always stacked at every position. There was a guy named Joe Burrow who was in that quarterback room and sat behind guys and eventually transferred and goes to LSU and does something similar to Jameson Williams, breaks out,
balls out in the league.
Yes,
like when Jalen Hurts transferred to Oklahoma and really made a name for himself.
Right. So just because J-Mo doesn't see the field at Ohio State, I don't think should be as big as a knock as some people think.
I completely agree with you, especially when you go back and we kind of talked about this kind of pre-pod. Who has Ohio State, as far as receivers go, who has Ohio State produced that also produced at the NFL level? We have Michael Thomas and Scary Terry, and really those are kind of the biggest guys.
Got Curtis Samuel is in there as well, but
really only 1.5 of those guys was someone that you can genuinely rely on being a wide receiver 1 for you.
And there's a whole lot of Alabama wide receivers in the NFL right now, dating back to Julio.
Countless. One every year usually.
Yep. So I think there's more to say. He was able to go into Alabama and become the guy. He kind of split there a little bit for a while with John Mechie, but I mean, he was by far and away the best and most explosive receiver you saw there at Alabama.
He is a game breaker.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, and he was playing a game. I forget what team he was playing against. I want to say Cincinnati, but he went out for a few plays with an injury, and that defense is like, oh, he's out. Let's go. We're ready to let's make something happen now. Why he's out? Because he's such a difference maker when he's in. So teams have to pay attention to him. Whether, with just his speed alone, I mean, they have to keep a fucking eye on him. They got to double coverage him at times. You've got to pay attention as a defensive coordinator. They're not just going to – I mean, it'll be interesting to see how he does in the NFL based off and how soon he's ready to play. I don't think he'll be ready for week 1 by any means. But I'm a big Jameson Williams guy, and that's a guy the Chiefs, I think, would be thrilled to have on their roster as well.
I agree. That is probably...
Along with a lot of teams.
It's really crazy when you look at this wide receiver room, or at least this wide receiver draft class. Really 1 through 5, you have an argument to make. They can really be anywhere. You can have Chris Olave be one.
It's a big 5 plus some.
Yeah.
In terms of round potential.
You have 3 to 4 or 3 to 5 guys that can be the guy, the best receiver in the class, and then you have a bunch of guys that can fall to the late first, early second. And it can go in there and be like, wow, this might have been the steal of the draft, even though they were drafted in the late first, early second.
Right.
That is still high value draft picks, but they could still be considered a steal just because of how stacked this receiver draft class is, which is just absolutely insane.
Receivers are just getting better and better each year, it seems like.
So, yeah, I mean, we said Drake London is kind of our consensus 1, Jameson Williams consensus 2. Traylon Burks came in here at 3.
Yeah, that's my guy.
That's Drake's guy. I really like him too. Like I said, Drake London, Traylon Burks are kind of 1A, 1B for me. They're animals in and of themselves. I mean, they're huge receivers. The speed is a little bit of a knock on them, but they both have multiple years of high level production. I mean, at least in Traylon Burks's situation, he did that in an SEC going up against cornerbacks and safeties that you see constantly going in the first, second round. So, I mean, the fact that he was able to have multiple years of high-level production there in Arkansas, and I mean, who has he had throwing to him, and he was still able to get all of these.
Felipe.
Yeah, they had Felipe Franks, KJ Jefferson last year, and he's only gotten better year in and year out.
Exactly.
And they use him a ton. His dominator rating was off the charts and really good percentile. And an off-the-field story with Traylon Burks that I just love hearing. So he's an Arkansas guy. He's a 4-star recruit out of high school, decided to stay home and go to Arkansas. Story. So he's a country guy. Yeah. That's the best way to describe him. He loves to go out there and hunt wild boar with his dogs. And he essentially looks at it like, I'm not bringing a gun out there. I'm not shooting. He goes out there with a knife and his dogs. Mm-hmm. So this dude is a country as it country gets. And I think he's a tough guy. I mean, he's hunting wild boars with his dogs. His dogs go out there and corner him, and he goes in with a knife. I mean, I don't know. I've never hunted wild boar before,
boars, but... No, I haven't either, but these wild boars are no joke. So I didn't know there were wild boars. More so wild pigs down in South Florida where my grandparents live, Fort Myers, shout out. But in their gated community neighborhood deal, they literally had these pig traps out when I was a little kid. And I'd always go biking around. I'd be like, what are those? These cages were huge. Mm-hmm. Actually, bigger than this table. These things are absolutely massive. And to think about someone hunting these, and they're aggressive.
Oh yeah.
You don't want these in your community. You don't want them near your land, your property, your farming, your agriculture.
That's why he's got his dogs out there with him.
He's out here hunting these with his hands. I would have to think whoever signs him, most likely in the first round, whoever signs him is going to include a gun clause. Use a gun.
Or just don't fuck around with hogs clause.
Right. Well, you can hunt your hogs, but you got to use a gun.
That'll be an interesting contract discussion for him as well once he gets drafted. Go
ahead.
Yeah, so we're big Traylon Burks fans. We got him in our top 3. I would even petition to have him as that wide receiver 1 just for the fact that he's going to fall in the first round and be in a more favorable spot maybe than some of these early guys like Drake London, Jameson Williams, Olave, and Wilson. And speaking of Olave Wilson, that's kind of who we've got next here. Zach, what do you have something to say that you were?
No, I was just going to try and segue in. So Treylon Burks there at 3. Then we do have the Ohio State duo there. Chris Olave there at 4. Garrett Wilson at 5. Honestly, these guys are pretty interchangeable there. I think there isn't, like we kind of said earlier, I think there's an argument that could be made that you have Olave or Wilson 1, 2, or 3, 4, wherever. These top 5 guys are all interchangeable. I think a lot of it has to do with landing space, who their quarterback's going to be, who they have throwing to them. Both of these guys were standout receivers at Ohio State, really showed out, balled out, did all of that. Again, both of them having multi-year levels of production. I mean, they were producing for long enough that they booted Jamison Williams out of Ohio State and made him go to Alabama. So I think there's a lot to say there about their talent levels and their usage levels. We have them there at 4 or 5.
I like us having Olave over Wilson. I mean, I think, like we said, that could kind of go interchangeable. And these top 5 guys are essentially all interchangeable at this point. But I do like that we have Olave over Wilson, at least in this point in time. I think Olave is the more pro-ready guy. Maybe Garrett Wilson, you could argue, has a higher ceiling and more room to grow. But I just see Garrett Wilson going to a team like the Washington Commanders, just a meh landing spot that you're just not excited about. Where Chris Olave, I think he fits in somewhere with maybe the New England Patriots, as well as, I think the Philadelphia Eagles would be a decent landing spot as well. So I think Olave just got a little bit better of a chance at a better landing spot. But Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, there's not much difference between these two guys. So anything else on Olave and Wilson?
I mean, Olave was my number 2 wide receiver overall, and I really like 2 guys, and then to me these big 5. You have the big 5 we talked about. I think it's Drake London, Olave, and Jamison Williams are kind of in a tier above those other 2. I know that's somewhat controversial, but Olave, that's art. Anytime you watch Ohio State football, you're watching this dude create highlights. Now, when you stack up the numbers, they were so loaded there. Plus, they have another guy that's maybe one of the best wide receivers next year, Njigba.
Yep, Jackson Smith and Njigba.
Really fun name. But Olave, I really like Olave. I think he's a tier above if I'm going to separate it into a 3-2.
Right. The dude's just such a clean route runner. Olave is. So Chris Olave there at 4, Garrett Wilson at 5. So at number 6 here, and we're still kind of in the first round territory. Like even 6 and 7 or this 8th guy. Like all these guys could still go first round. I mean, I think we'll see 5 to 6 guys, but
honestly, 6 through 9 have depending on what mock you look at.
Right.
All of them have first round potential here.
We've got Jahan Dotson out of Penn State at 6. Kind of a guy that's been catching our eye a lot lately. He's never had the best quarterback play, so you always kind of see him making acrobatic catches with balls not quite as accurate as he would like him to. And he played at a really good school in Penn State. Jahan Dotson, that's a guy that even the Chiefs, if we look to draft him and try and get him in the middle second round somewhere, I would be thrilled with that. I like Jahan Dotson.
If we can get him in the first round, I mean,
right.
Again, this is all pre-draft speculation here. I watched a lot of Jahan Dotson film when I saw a mock draft have him falling to us, so I got really interested and wanted to look into him. This dude, you mentioned it, he has a massive catch radius. He is all over the place with his hands. I know if you're a Kansas City Chiefs watcher and fan, a big argument against like Tyreek, against Demarcus Robinson, against all of our guys is they catch it in on their body, and this guy's just consistently reaching out over his head, extending his hands away from his body, making these incredible acrobatic catches.
Right.
He is a guy that he's not gonna have a lot of passes drop. I think they said that he had like the lowest drop percentage too.
I think that was Pickens who was at the top of the charts, but I think Jahan was up there as well.
So, yeah,
And
really big fan of Jahan Dotson.
Yep, I agree. He reminds me of a lot of Deontay Johnson, except much better hands.
Personally, I know this is our consensus rankings, but at this point, Brees is off the board, our big five's off the board. This is where I might look at K-Walk 3. Probably the only other.
I feel like he'll be picked before some of these guys. I think he could go after Garrett Wilson, but before Jahan Dotson and other guys we'll talk about as well.
That is crazy to think about. Like, obviously, like right now we were just talking about we're only talking about receivers here, and like you brought up the running backs, but I mean we have 10 guys, 7 or 8 of which could go in the first round. I mean you're talking about 7 to 8 receivers going in the first round depending on where they land, and in our league it's a 10 league super flex or 10 team super flex, excuse me. So I mean you're talking about being able to get someone like a Jahan Dotson or a George Pickens, Christian Watson, who we'll get to later, in the second round. And even with that, again, you'll be able to get someone like a Kenneth Walker, Isaiah Spiller, Rashad. All of those guys would also probably be available there.
Same range.
Yeah, all of these guys might be available there in the second round. And then in the third round, that's when you're kind of throwing your Hail Mary passes on, all right, you're going to be sitting on my taxi rookie squad. Just kind of waiting for your time to shine, waiting for an injury or something like that to happen where you can throw them into a flex position. But there are so many guys in this draft class that are just outstanding, and there's a lot of value to be had there, not only in actual NFL play, but in fantasy football and dynasty fantasy football especially.
Yep. So Jahan Dotson there at number 6. And another guy that's going to fit this same mold, like George Pickens. I mean, a lot of people look at him and say if he had a more healthy career at Georgia, had put up more production at Georgia, this guy's the wide receiver 1 in the class. Mm-hmm. And I think he has that potential. He's a big-bodied wide receiver. I think he reminds me of a lot of Devontae Adams as well. And, I mean, that's a high upside guy that you could still get in your rookie mock draft towards the end of the first round, early second round. And essentially same for NFL-wise as well. But he broke out at an early age, and like I said, he's dealt with injuries a little bit at Georgia with a couple. He had an ACL injury, I think, most recently, but was able to come back and play down the stretch for Georgia on their national championship run.
Also has some disciplinary issues. We saw that a little bit as well, getting some suspensions, things like that. Didn't mean to derail you there. I feel like you were kind of on a run. I just wanted to kind of plug that in.
Good.
I feel like he is almost someone more. I mean, he probably has the greatest range of any of these wide receivers, where I've seen him go as early as like pick 22 to the Packers to as low as like 50 or 52, whatever the Chiefs' second one is. I mean, obviously, these are all mocks that we've seen.
My opinion on Pickens is you look at some of these other guys, like I look at Olave, I look at Dotson. Those guys seem like great wide receiver 2 options for your offense. Mm-hmm. George Pickens, on the other hand, could grow into that wide receiver 1 in your offense. I think he has that potential. So to snag him in early round 2 of your rookie draft in a 10-team format, I mean, I think that's a really good value.
I think what will really dictate whether or not George Pickens becomes an elite level producer at the NFL is going to be whether or not he is drafted by a team where he's not immediately put in that position to try and be wide receiver 1. Like, I feel like when DK Metcalf, someone like him, was drafted, he was able to kind of be the guy behind Tyler Lockett for a few years, and that actually ended up helping him and increased his value and production level because he was able to learn from Russell, and kind of find his molding into the offense. He didn't have to go in and immediately be that guy. Whereas I feel like some of these receivers, they're drafted to be the guy immediately, and that's kind of what screws them in the long run because they're in here and they're trying to be the guy. They kind of come in there with that swagger. They don't have anyone to kind of learn under. They're just trying to go out there and do too much almost.
And Pickens, he's still an early declare, which is what you like to see, and he's a bigger wide receiver, like we mentioned, 6'3", 195, 21 years old. He ran a blazing 4.47 at that size. That's moving. And I think the Packers, off the top of my head sound like a great landing spot to kind of pair with Lazard and Watkins and Amari Rodgers. I mean, I think that would fit that offense very well. So George Pickens, definitely a guy that should be on your radar.
Especially when you think, like, once you get into the NFL, a lot of these guys get on different weight programs, different eating habits, all of that. I mean, a lot, like, if you see that size, like, maybe you don't like the one, would you say his weight was like 180?
Yeah, but he's just under 200 pounds.
Just under. I mean, a lot of the time you're going to see them probably get anywhere between 8 and 12 pounds gained on that as well once they get into the NFL.
Right. He's kind of an A.J. Green 2.0. I mean, I know they both played at Georgia, so it's a pretty easy comparison to make, but that is Player Profile's main player comp for Pickens is A.J. Green. And I think that he's going to have similar upside, a similar career as A.J. Green. And A.J. Green is still in the league. He is coming back to the Arizona Cardinals, so Arizona Cardinals, another team that need a wide receiver.
It sounds like we should have had Pickens higher on this list.
Yeah, we are talking pretty highly of him.
Flip him.
I mean,
flip him up a spot.
I mean, that's a thing. Like,
we have way more to say about this dude.
Well, I think I feel like that's because there's a lot more to say about him. He is someone that has the potential to be going in the early 20s. He also has the potential to be going in the 50s, 40s, 50s. So I just feel like there's so many different things that could happen, especially, again, this is all pre-NFL draft. We're making all of these decisions just based on film, stats, different mock drafts that we've seen, different articles and write-ups that we've seen about the guy. And so, and especially with George Pickens, like, he really hasn't had a full season of production. You have little glimpses of what he can be, and it's, can he stay healthy? Can he stay disciplined? Can he stay out of trouble? Can he do all of these things? Because once you get, obviously when you're in college, it's like your big not party schools, but, you know,
living that college life.
Yeah, and then when you get to the NFL, you're living that college life and you're making millions of dollars as well. Like, these guys are still 23, 24, 25 years old, making millions of dollars. And so at that point, I mean, you saw, I don't want to bring this up, but like Henry Ruggs, you know, he had all the opportunities in the world and he made all of the wrong choices with those opportunities that were presented to him. And so with George Pickens, it's like, will he go somewhere where he's able to get the coaching, the instruction, the teaching to not have to make those wrong decisions, I guess. That's just kind of my thing with George Pickens. Has elite potential, but could also go out there and ruin everything for himself.
Yeah, I mean, just the fact of the matter that if we're just talking about potential, and I think that's where we're at here, where he would go in the draft. All of our dudes have already gone, and at that point, and this is just a rookie draft. You're all still gonna have your full regular league draft if this is a startup. Mm-hmm. If it's already dynasty, you already have guys on. So after all those guys are taken, all of these guys you really want, the Breece Hall and those big five that we keep talking about, I just feel like we should have Pickens over Dotson. If everyone's thinking at that point that he could be a number one guy, then we should draft him like we think he'll be the number one guy, because we don't think that about Dotson. If we think his ceiling is what it is, and we just assume who's already off the board and who's already on everyone's rosters, it's at this point in the draft, it's all about taking those risks.
That's what I love about this podcast in general. Once we sit down and we start talking about these guys, like you're saying, Vinna, we had a lot to say about Pickens. Kind of once you get to a spot, you start having discussions about guys. I mean, we learned to like these guys, and there's a lot of reasons to like plenty of these guys. And George Pickens, I think he's one of those guys. If you need a wide receiver at good value, he's going to be a good option for you. So George Pickens there at 7. Anything else to say about Pickens?
I don't think there's anything that we haven't already said about him.
Okay.
Risky Pickens. Just might pick him.
Just might pick him, George Pickens. All right, we'll move on to number 8 here. We are just doing a top 10 here. So at number 8, we got Christian Watson out of North Dakota State. Coming from a lower level of football, so we do need to kind of keep that in mind. I mean, I think it does
discredit that.
I think it does hurt him. I mean, we can't I think we need to bring him down just a little bit. But he's the type of guy, you get the ball in his hands, he dominated at North Dakota State, whether it's the screen game, whether he was just taking verticals down the field, taking the top off the defense. Like, he's got that speed. He's got the incredible athletic tangibles. And Christian Watson could grow into a very solid wide receiver in the NFL, I believe. And you'd be able to get him at a good price as well, maybe late second round. I mean, early second, late first, possibly. Kind of in the same discussion with Pickett and Dotson as well. But Christian Watson at number 8.
So he was on that list of dudes on the Chiefs top 30 we were talking about earlier. So that's interesting. This is not someone that's going to be a high round draft pick in the real draft, but it is interesting. I want to emphasize how big I care about actual production in college, and I know that's a cliche. It doesn't always translate over, but
it's part of the
at
pie.
least they're putting up the numbers, and at least if we can't discredit lower level players, there's a laundry list, and I actually would love to know the ratio of non-Division I players that actually get drafted, how successful they are or aren't, because the only non-D1 players I can think of have all been successful just off the top of my head. John Brown out of the alumnus Pittsburgh State University.
Gorillas.
Pierre Desir. He had a fairly successful career. He's not really a well-known guy, but he was a corner out of Lindenwood. Pitt State would play him. I know he got drafted that same year, and I have a list pulled up, guys.
I forget where Cooper Kupp played, but Cooper Kupp, he fits that mold as well.
Non-D1 guys here, and again, I want to know the total of drafted non-D1. But Tyler Thigpen, he was on that laundry list of Chiefs QBs. Kevin Boss, that dude was good. Vincent Jackson, Northern Colorado.
Ooh,
legend.
That's an interesting comparison.
Tim Hightower, Richmond, didn't know that. Joe Flacco, Delaware.
Yeah, Christian
Dominique
Watson.
Rogers Cromartie. We got dudes. Rhett Bomer, that dude committed to Oklahoma. He was supposed to be our like Cam Newton, oh God, he was one of the biggest busts. That's off top.
Yep, Christian Washington, he's just one of those guys. I think drops have maybe been a problem with him in the past, but he's just kind of a guy, you give him the ball, and he's a difference maker with the ball in his hands. So that's another Chiefs landing spot that I wouldn't mind for Christian Watson. So we've got him at number 8.
Kurt Warner. Sorry.
All right, we're moving on to number
Jerry
9.
Rice. Sorry.
Number 9 here, another lower level guy, Sky Moore. He's an interesting round 2 possible draft pick for NFL teams. I'm trying to pull up his profile here. He's out of Western Michigan, same school as D. Eskridge last year. And there was a lot of hype with D. Eskridge. I remember I think I had him on my roster at one point in time and eventually dropped him. I don't think he's on anybody's roster, at least in our league currently. But lower level guy like Christian Watson. He's a smaller guy. He's 5'10", 195 pounds. So the weight's not bad with the height. I think that proportionally is pretty solid. He ran a 4.41 40-yard dash, which lands him in the 90th percentile for his size and weight.
What the fuck was that?
I'm just running out of breath here as I go through this. But Sky Moore, there at number 9.
I don't think there's a whole lot to say about Sky Moore. I mean, like you said, coming from a smaller school, he has a lot of production at the smaller school level. A lot of it's going to be kind of landing spot for him. Again, this is all pre-draft stuff. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot more to say about Sky Moore. I've seen a couple mock drafts with him going to the Chiefs.
And we'll quickly round out our top 10 here for our consensus wide receivers. Wan'Dale Robinson here at number 10 from Kentucky. We talked about him a little bit. He's my sleeper, so we've got him as number 10, maybe a little higher than most places would have him, but big fans of Wan'Dale Robinson. We've got him here at number 10 to round out the top 10 wide receiver position. A very deep position for this upcoming draft. So next is wide running backs. So we'll go ahead and get started. Off the top, we got Breece Hall.
Easily consensus number 1 overall.
Yep, not many questions there. I think Breece Hall is
talk about him.
the best running back in this draft. So we kind of move on. I think Kenneth Walker, the third, is kind of that consensus number 2 running back for us. I don't think we had much argument there either.
And we've already kind of talked about him as well.
He can run the shit out of the ball. Not as good in the receiving game. Maybe profiles as like a Nick Chubb. Maybe best case scenario.
You've got to look at what does your roster look like in terms of who do you have at wideout, who do you got at running back. Breece Hall's going 1-1. If you need a running back, depending on your wide receiver room, you probably want to take walk 3. If you think you're good on running backs, those 5 wide receivers are probably better. But walk 3 is a first round guy. Do not leave him on the board in the first round.
Yeah, but I definitely see Walker still going in those top 6, 7 picks in rookie drafts, guaranteed. Next on the board, Rachaad White. Rachaad White's a my guy out of Arizona State. A lot of places have Isaiah Spiller here as this third guy. I think we're a little lower on Isaiah Spiller than most places as well. So draft capital is going to be a big determining factor for Rachaad. But we're big on him. We've got him here at number 3. Then we got Isaiah Spiller here after him at number 4. And then Zamir White here at number 5. So running back class isn't as deep as you would like it. If you need a running back here in this class and you're not getting one of those top 3 guys, you're going to be throwing darts at guys after that in your rookie draft. So if you need a running back, trade up for the 101, overpay for it. I would. I've been trying to. I already have. I acquired the 101 in my 1 quarterback dynasty league. I traded away CMC along with just CMC. I traded away CMC for the 101 and Antonio Gibson as well. So I got 2 solid running backs, and I'm going to draft Breece Hall 101, and with Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker. After that, it's kind of a crapshoot.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, there's receivers. I mean, we had to do a top 10. There's receivers we haven't even talked about that you'd be looking at more than a lot of these other running backs. Let's just not forget Kennedy Brooks. Like I said, he's a guy that you'll be able to add to your roster post-draft, and if anyone in this room does that, there'll be words.
I think Zamir White is an interesting guy to have there at number 5. He shared carries with James Cook at Georgia. He ran a solid 40 time. I want to say it was like a 4.4. Let's see if I can pull it up here real quick. But he's a guy I wouldn't mind drafting if you needed. You need a running back. He showed that touchdown potential on any given play based on his speed. He ran a 4.4 flat. Kind of some comparisons are J.K. Dobbins, Damian Williams, Damian Harris, and the main player style comp is Josh Jacobs. So those are all good comparisons, and I wouldn't, if you want to take a stab on any guy, maybe in that second round, I think Zamir White is a solid candidate for that stab.
Kind of like what you said. I feel like after Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, and even Rachaad White, Isaiah Spiller, you're kind of just throwing darts at the wall. A lot of it's just going to be dependent on is the person ahead of them getting hurt? Are they going to be doing split time? How much time are they reliably getting to split? Someone like Ramondre Stevenson behind Damian Harrison and maybe even James White.
You love the landing spot with Ramondre Stevenson, but you don't love that that's a crowded backfield.
Exactly. So I feel like a lot of these guys are going to be someone that you probably bench for a little bit, and then maybe they have breakout.
And I think one thing to consider, at least with strategy, at least for these late round running backs, is I think there's a good chance these late round running backs, and I mean late round as in late round 2 and third round running backs, is they might not produce a whole lot in their first year. Mm-mm. So that owner that after their first year is not going to be too thrilled with the production they received from that running back they drafted in their rookie draft. So maybe if someone you still believe in, and maybe you can go out and acquire him dirt cheap heading into next season.
I could see a lot of these being waiver wire guys come the off season or even mid this season.
Yep. Ramondre last year in my 1 quarterback dynasty league with 12 teams, he was eventually put on the waiver wires, and I'm like, yep, I'm picking
Yeah.
Ramondre up.
100%.
So some of these guys, maybe if you don't want to take a stab on them, maybe wait and see how year one shakes out. Maybe you can pick them up off the waivers or even trade for them dirt cheap.
Yep.
Remember, when it comes to dynasty football, people are really only focusing in on that dynasty, that long-term aspect of things. That's at the front of their minds at 2 points during the draft and leading up to the draft. Whenever they decide to do their pre-draft research, remember we're doing more research than anyone else. If you're listening to us, you're doing above and beyond what whoever's in your league who you're playing with. I'd venture to say we're doing more. So there's only 2 times when people are thinking long term. So what we were just saying, in the middle of the year, people are going to get upset. People are going to get down. They're going to see a 29 or 30-something-year-old running back on the waiver wire that's actually doing something right here, right now. But these guys we're talking about, they haven't even been given the chance yet.
And running back's always a super needy position for a lot of fantasy teams. And it'll be interesting to see in our rookie draft to see how maybe some guys reach on some of these running backs. And that means some of the wide receivers fall. I mean, we're going to benefit from that. I mean, we know that the wide receivers class is stacked and some of these guys are interchangeable in the first round and in the second round even as well. So hopefully maybe some guys reach on a lot of running backs. I mean, I'll be interesting to see how high Isaiah Spiller goes. Maybe he goes over a guy like Kenneth Walker for some reason in our league. I mean, a lot of people aren't as tuned in as we are. It's kind of the biggest reason for our podcast in general is we just want to kind of generate more buzz in our league and generate more involvement. And just, I mean, we're still fairly new to Dynasty, but this offseason has been a blast. And you're rocking with these guys. They're getting new contracts, going to play other places. Things change yearly in the NFL. So you got to kind of ride with it. But that's it for the running back position. We just did a top 5. We didn't want to get too in-depth there pre-draft. Top heavy for sure. Not quite as deep as that wide receiver position.
Yeah, going off into the quarterback position, I think the consensus here is Malik Willis being that number 1 prospect, at least for Dynasty football. Kind of talked about his potential. He's definitely a raw athlete. We've kind of already talked about him ad nauseum. Any complaints, disputes, or anything here? Nick, I know you said you're not huge on this draft class. You talked about how you kind of convinced yourself that Sam Howell might be the best guy here in this class. What do you think about Malik Willis here at number 1?
I just think that there's a lot better talent with so many wide receivers and those 3 running backs. I mean, these quarterbacks, are they ever going to start? We know how this goes, folks. We know how this goes. Look at the 5 QBs taken in the first round last year. You've heard all of their names. They all were doing big things. This year, the only name you have heard is Sam Howell up until this season. I really don't. You can wait till next year, folks. You can wait till next year.
And I think Malik Willis in rookie draft formats.
Remember, Dynasty, long term. You can wait till next year.
Yeah, we're talking Dynasty Superflex. Like, quarterback is the most important position in Superflex's league. So, I mean, if you need to take a stab on a guy like Malik Willis, I mean, I think that's probably your best bet. It just gets to a point to where maybe the value is too rich. I think a lot of Superflex mock drafts, rookie mock drafts, have him maybe going number 2 overall, right there after Breece Hall. And I think that's a little bit too rich for me. But if he does land somewhere like the Steelers, kind of like what we discussed about Peter Schrager's mock draft, I mean, I think the Steelers are a prime landing spot for one of these guys, whether it's Willis, Pickett, or Ritter. So all of this can kind of be interchangeable, but Malik Willis has all the intangibles. He's got a cannon arm. Obviously, can create through the running game as well and can throw off platform, can get out of the pocket and create plays. He did that at Liberty, which needs to be considered. So it's interesting that we still have him at number 1, even though he did play at a lower level. But he was a 4-star recruit out of high school and did go to Auburn out of college and decided to transfer. They had Bo Nix there, who was a pretty locked-in starter. Bo Nix did end up transferring as well, so that's kind of funny. But Malik Willis went to Liberty and found a groove, found a spot where he could be the starting quarterback, and showed out. And now he's going to be a first-round draft pick in the NFL. I think top 10 pick potential.
I agree. Like we said, we've kind of already talked about Malik Willis a little bit. Let's go here to the number 2 guy on our list. Kenny Pickett, another one that might have that top 10 potential. I know the mocks kind of have him going anywhere between 6 and 20. Whether or not Carolina wants to go up.
Last time I'll interrupt. If there's a quarterback drafted in the first round, it's Malik Willis. I cannot be convinced that anyone else is getting taken first round.
I think there's going to be 3
minimum.
Anywho, Kenny Pickett is a guy that we haven't really talked about a whole lot.
Last time I'll say it.
Kenny Pickett's a guy we haven't talked about a whole lot, at least this podcast. Who knows, that might change. He was a guy at the combine. A lot of people were talking about the small hand size. I know there's stats that show that quarterbacks with the small hands don't always produce well at the NFL level.
And he does rock the gloves.
He is a 2-glove guy. I think a lot goes to show that he played in Pittsburgh outside in the inclement weather, went out and put on a show. He was a guy. We'll go here through his stats, kind of like what we have with pretty much everyone here that we haven't really discussed. He was a 5-year guy there at Pitt. Didn't play a whole lot as a freshman. First full season there at Pitt as a sophomore. Had almost 2,000 yards, 12 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. As a junior in 12 games, he had 3,100 yards, 13 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Looks like he got hurt his senior year. Had about 2,400 yards, 13 touchdowns, 9 interceptions again. And then had a huge breakout season as his super senior year, where he had 4,300 yards, 42 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions, which is just absolutely insane when you think about that. I mean, 4,300 yards in 13 games, 42 touchdowns with only the 7 interceptions. Again, just to kind of reiterate that. Had a huge breakout season, played in the ACC, which, depending on how you look at it, is kind of a weaker conference. It's not the Big 12.
Right.
Those guys go out there, they play defense. It's more than what you see kind of in that pass-heavy Big 12. But he went out and balled. He had the fake QB slide, kind of that.
I remember that.
Where they had to come out and almost do a rule change.
Yeah, they made a rule after it.
So, kind of cool. We saw Michael Vick kind of do something like that
way back when. Yep.
But I think he might be the most NFL ready of any of these quarterbacks. I think that you're going to what you see here his senior year is kind of what his peak's going to be in the NFL. If he's able to kind of replicate that, where you see 3,500 yards, 35 to 4,000 yards. Maybe seeing like 20 to 30 touchdowns. Once he gets into the groove, obviously rookies kind of see that struggle once they get in there right away.
I think it's possible he goes number 6 to the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah.
Matt Rule is very familiar with the guy, recruited him when he was a coach at Temple before he went to Baylor. So, Kenny Pickett, I think it's a guy that he could come in and have a starting role his first season at a QB-needy team. So if you need to take a stab on a guy, Kenny Pickett could be your guy. So we got Malik Willis at 1, Kenny Pickett at 2.
I have to say, if we have any Pitt Panther fans out there, is there something that we're missing? How did this dude start in 2018, 19, 20, going 1,900 yards, 12 touchdowns, 3,000 yards, 13 touchdowns, 2,400 yards, 13 touchdowns, and then he goes 4,300 yards and 42 touchdowns and throws the least interceptions of his career. Now he threw 7 first year he played. He had 6. Is there something we're missing, Pitt? Were there transfers in?
He's got
there
them
a new
small
OC? Is there something we're missing?
He's got those small hands, man. They've been. He could still be that first quarterback picked. I think it's still a possibility he goes before Malik Willis. I think there's been a lot of smoke maybe thrown his way. People like Matt Rule seems to have an opinion on every freaking wide receiver quarterback in this draft, and maybe Kenny Pickett is that number one guy according to NFL teams.
If you're Matt Rule and you're trying to keep your job, you're on the hot seat this year. Are you taking Malik Willis or Kenny Pickett with that first pick?
I might, just because I don't want to rock.
You don't have time for a project.
Would you rather rock with Sam Darnold?
That's the thing. I don't think...
When I got better motherfuckers coming next year.
No, you don't.
There's a plethora of better quarterbacks coming next year. You can draft at number 6. You can draft a fucking future top 3 player at the position at number 6. And you can you're not winning the Super Bowl this year, Carolina. Just wait for next year. You're probably still picking top 10, and you have a plethora of quarterbacks.
I don't think Matt Rule doesn't have a next year. He has.
No, he doesn't. So I'm not.
That's
taking
his problem.
Project at quarterback. I'm not taking a project.
He might need to. That's what we're saying.
That's why they're looking at someone like Kenny Pickett, who is the most NFL ready.
Trevor Lawrence, if I have to win now, I want to draft someone like that. I don't want to draft.
Well, not everybody can have the number 1 overall pick.
A rookie that had. No one is super excited about these guys. Maybe it's just me.
Hey, guess what? Sometimes you just have to play the chips where they fall. Like he hasn't performed in his few years there in Carolina. He hasn't lived up to the expectation, to the hype. He hasn't been able to do all of this. He's had 3 years now? Is this his 4th year or is this his 3rd year?
And he's never had a quarterback.
No, so why stick with something that doesn't work?
He honestly reminds me of a lot of Blaine Gabbert coming out. Blaine Gabbert went 11th overall, and we all know how that worked out. So, I mean, teams need quarterbacks, and if there's only a select few that are even first round, graded guys, I mean, Kenny Pickett, I mean, I think he's a lock to go first round as well. Next guy here on the list is Desmond Ridder. There's been 13 teams that have kind of declared him as a first round, given him a first round grade. So Desmond Ridder is here as a number 3 quarterback. We've kind of talked about him earlier in the pod, but that's another guy with a little bit of rushing upside and a lot of experience in college. Dude had 116 total touchdowns, which that's a ton. He was a 4-year starter there. Desmond Ridder there at 3. And number 4, this is where we got Sam Howell. Ventna's my guy. We talked a lot about him already. So Sam Howell there at number 4 out of North Carolina. Will be interesting to see if he fits into that first round or not. At this point, nobody knows. Ventna doesn't think so, even though that's the guy he's hitching his trailer to.
You guys have me convinced that maybe Malik and Kenny, which is still hitting the under that we talked about earlier. Just saying.
And then we got Matt Corral here.
That's a heavy investment.
And now we've got Matt Corral here to finalize our top 5. And I think we might even be a little low on Matt Corral than we should be. I think it's possible that he could be that 3rd quarterback taken, even maybe before Ridder. So it'll be interesting to see what Matt Corral goes and how we adjust our rankings after the draft. But we'll go through this again. 1, Malik Willis. 2, Kenny Pickett. 3, Desmond Ridder. 4, Sam Howell. 5, Matt Corral. Any quarterback after that, probably don't want to mess with it.
That does go to show when it comes to quarterback above all of these positions, it really is all about who just drafted you. And it's kind of in the sense, you might feel really good about a Jordan Love if we're looking back at that QB class, because when you look at that draft pick, you're saying, oh, they probably intend to fully start him.
Right, in a year or two.
Everything plays out. But just to say, you see quarterbacks all the time. There's going to be guys that we just talked about that are going to be drafted by teams that have a rock solid starter in place, and all of a sudden they tanked. But if a Malik Willis or a Kenny Pickett, if these guys go to a team that made on the bench 1 year candidate, placement is everything when it comes to quarterbacks. I mean, really, though, when the Chiefs drafted Pat Mahomes, there was every intention. I mean, when you just look at the whole draft pick, we traded up, we gave a lot away, and we started Alex Smith that year, but
he's our guy for the future.
The Packers, I guess, to discredit the Jordan Love take, I had I mean, they didn't trade up for the guy. It was a shocking pick. No one was chopping at the bits to take Jordan Love. That was such a bad draft pick.
Yep.
I mean, total hindsight, but placement is everything. Is this a quarterback that has nobody in front of him? Maybe there's a Band-Aid quarterback that they're gonna rock for a year and hope you can play, or did you get like when Mason Rudolph went to Pittsburgh? He's sitting behind Big Ben, and that was at a time. This was before Big Ben was approaching the very end of his years. It's like Mason Rudolph. He's coming into the draft. He's a very promising dude. He did huge numbers at Okie State. Looks like a total pro-type QB, and he gets drafted by Pittsburgh, and he's just obviously sitting behind Big Ben.
Right. I totally agree with your saying. Some of these bottom three guys, maybe not Malik Willis or Kenny Pickett, but some of these guys, I mean, they could come into situations like the Lions or Atlanta where they've got Jared Goff, they've got Mariota, so they've got bridge quarterbacks in place. Even Steelers, they got Trubisky. So a lot of these guys could come into situations where they're not rushed into it and they're allowed to set out a year and learn. Like a lot of teams have these bridge quarterbacks ready to roll. You got Jared Goff, Mariota, Trubisky. There's probably a few others out there, but
and bridges will be burned, and there will be better prospects next year, folks.
Absolutely. And we do have one tight end we want to mention. We haven't dug too much into the tight ends, but Trey McBride out of Colorado State is kind of that main tight end prospect that sticks out to us. So if you do need a tight end, maybe snag him in late second round possibly is kind of where I see him going at the moment. So I think he kind of reminds me of a guy like George Kittle. He's a big guy, receiving ability, and he's going to be able to block as well. I mean, he's going to fit in the NFL pretty seamlessly, I believe.
Yeah, so, I mean, that kind of wraps up one of our rookie kind of breakdown is. Obviously, again, we've mentioned this multiple times. This is all pre-draft. We have that coming up here next week. We're all super excited about that. We'll definitely have a re-rank coming out based on what all of these landing spots are. Yep. We'll have a lot of juicy news to tell based on what happens here in the next 7 to 10 days, what trades have been made, what deals have been done, who was given their contract extension, who was not, who's sitting out, who won't be. There's a lot of stuff going on right now in the NFL world, a lot of stuff to keep your eye on if you're here listening to the podcast. Going to be a lot of good stuff coming up. But, I mean, other than that, to be looking forward, like we said, kind of have the NFL draft coming up. Got that rookie re-rank coming out. We'll be telling you all of our opinions based on where everyone's gone and kind of break it down for you, see if we can give you our advice moving forward.
Yep, and hopefully we'll get one more pod out before the draft begins on Thursday. We'll maybe try and find a mock draft and look at potential landing spots and how we view those. I think we really want to try and dig into the Chiefs draft outlook as well, what the Chiefs might do, and a lot's going to change, a lot's going to happen in just a week's time. So everything could be flipped on its head here next week, and like guys like Debo and DK and Scary Terry could be going different places, and all of a sudden those teams don't need wide receivers, and all of a sudden Debo goes somewhere, the 49ers need a wide receiver. Everything could change in a week's time.
No one knows what's going on.
That's what makes it so much fun. I mean, it's fun to cover the NFL. Maybe it's not fun to own a team and try and bring players into your team. It's tricky right now. You got to pay wide receivers out the ass, but it's fun to cover. So,
closing out, just tying up the loose ends of the night, that wide receiver room for the New York Giants, that's getting paid $40.1 million. Folks, think about all the other teams that you think of are loaded at wide receiver. There's a number of them, but we're talking about the New York Giants. And I was looking at this, and I was wondering how this could possibly add up. I added all of it up on my calculator. $40.1 million to Kenny Golladay, Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton. They have him listed here as second on the depth chart. Kadarius Toney, some Richie James, CJ Board. All of this adds up. Some of these guys are getting paid over $1 million each.
And the Giants have a lot of draft capital this year too. They got 2 picks in the top 10, and they could trade out of it and get more draft capital that way. But I see them maybe leaning towards defense early on with their picks.
When everyone wants wide receiver, they're paying so much money to garbage.
Yep.
Rip.
Not a good spot to be in.
And have a terrible quarterback. Rip.
But that'll conclude our first ever episode. Hopefully, if we get this edited and put out, episode of the DNZ podcast. Here we'll submit our shameful plug. Follow us at our non-existent DNZ Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook pages. If you're listening to us on YouTube, which is the only way you'll be able to listen to us for a little bit, make sure you give us a like and subscribe. We'll be sure to put out episodes, hopefully at least once a week throughout this whole off season. We'll be covering summer workouts, obviously the draft, seeing who's showing up to their workouts, training camps, mini camps, rookie camps, all of that. We'll get you covered, and we'll make sure that you get all of your fantasy football needs here at DNZ Pod.